Oh, my involvement in the Golden Dawn. I was very interested, actually, in.
For half a century, Jimmy Page was sold to the world as a guitar god, the untouchable architect of Led Zeppelin, but a dark shadow dogged that image for way too long. Page was obsessed with Aleister Crowley. The phrase "do what thou wilt" was stamped right on Led Zeppelin's vinyl. In '71, Page bought Crowley's old estate on Loch Ness. Then came the whispers. Supposed satanic messages hidden in Stairway to Heaven when played backward. The kicker? Page didn't try to kill the rumors. He didn't stomp them out. Instead, he dropped a line that poured gasoline on the fire. "I don't want to talk about my beliefs or magic." So, was it all just paranoid public fantasy? Or did Page know exactly what he was doing? Did he understand the sheer power of keeping his name shrouded in fog? And if it was all just empty noise, why the hell did he let it run for so many years? To get the truth, we have to rewind. Back to the exact moment Jimmy Page was building more than just a sound. He was building his own legend. The public saw Jimmy Page as a figure of almost mythical proportions. He was the mastermind of Led Zeppelin, the architect of their sound, the man who wrote the playbook for an entire era. For years, his name dominated the covers of guitar magazines. He was a two-time inductee into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Over in Britain, he cemented his legacy as one of the most revered and sought-after guitarists of his time. All of this pushed him higher. He wasn't just a rock musician anymore. He was a cultural force. But the cult of Page wasn't built on raw talent alone. The real secret was distance. He guarded his privacy like a vault. He despised explaining himself. He deliberately left a void around him, a void the public eagerly filled with their own wild guesses. That silence gave his image serious weight. He came off as a man you couldn't quite figure out, and if you can't read a man, you sure as hell can't bring him down to earth. That stonewall secrecy didn't just drum up hype, it forged absolute authority. The higher his status climbed, the more valuable that smokescreen became. And it was deep inside that very smokescreen where the dark legend would so easily take root. The PR spin sounds convenient. Aleister Crowley was just an eccentric hobby for Jimmy Page, a weird little footnote in a rock star's life. But the hard facts blow that soft defense out of the water. A private quirk usually stays private. Here, the exact opposite happened. This dark obsession bled right into the public eye and became part of the brand. On one of Led Zeppelin's vinyl pressings, you'll find the phrase, "Do what thou wilt," stamped into the wax, the ultimate calling card of Crowley. In '71, Page drops cash on Crowley's old manor on the shores of Loch Ness. Soon enough, stories start leaking out. Talk of a heavy, almost haunted vibe creeping through the property. And when the rumors snowball into a full-blown myth, Page doesn't step up with a cold, hard, definitive explanation. He leaves it in the fog. Right there is your first glaring red flag. A private interest and a public dog whistle are two very different things. You can read Crowley, you can hoard strange books without weaving it all into your rock and roll mythos, but Page's obsession was too loud, too loaded with dark symbolism. It fit a little too perfectly into his untouchable, mysterious aura. That isn't dead to rights proof of Satanism, but it completely nukes the safe narrative that the public just pulled this out of thin air. Hell no. The fans blew the myth out of proportion, sure, but the raw material was sitting right there in plain sight, and Jimmy Page never lifted a finger to clean it up. If you're looking at this and seeing more than just crazy rumors, if you see a myth that was deliberately stoked from the inside for way too long, sound off in the comments. We need to know exactly which detail grabbed you the hardest. Crowley? The Loch Ness estate? Do what thou wilt? Or Page's years of dead silence? But let's keep moving, because right beneath this convenient excuse lies another layer entirely. The exact image of Jimmy Page that was sold to the public for years. The PR defense sounds awfully convenient. Page never confessed to a damn thing, so the whole dark narrative is just public fantasy. But here's where you hit the second massive red flag. It's not just about the dark symbols surrounding him, it's about his behavior. A man in his position could have shut it down. One hard, crystal-clear answer to kill the myth dead in its tracks. State for the record that his Crowley obsession had zero to do with Satanism. Call the rumors about magic and dark forces exactly what they were. Tabloid trash. End of story. But Page didn't do that. He played a much more profitable hand. Don't clarify, don't dismantle, just leave the whole thing hanging in the air. The most telling quote of the era does a better job than any official denial ever could. "I don't want to talk about my beliefs or magic." You drop a line like that, the legend doesn't die. It gets a massive hit of oxygen. And this wasn't some isolated fluke. It was part of a broader pattern. Even the history books paint Page as a guy who fiercely guarded his privacy, hoarding his secrets until he became even more mysterious. That's why the myth didn't just survive on cheap press and fan theories. It survived on Page's own master strategy. Never give the public the one hard truth that would finally shatter the disturbing legend. He didn't clear the fog. He put it to work for the brand. We don't need to prove Jimmy Page's Satanism here. We need to admit a much more uncomfortable truth. Too many pieces of his public image were pointing in the exact same direction to just write it all off as background noise. The public had a rock god with an almost untouchable status. Tied right to that name was Crowley. The phrase, "do what thou wilt," the Loch Ness estate, the talk of magic, and that constant refusal to give a straight, grounding answer. This isn't just one weird fluke anymore. It's a rock-solid structure. This is exactly where the "it was all blown out of proportion" defense falls apart. Blown out of proportion? Sure. But you can only fan the flames of something that already has a shape. Page didn't have to go on the record to make this myth work for him. All he had to do was leave the symbols out in the open, not kill the associations, and never completely shut the door on the topic. And that's exactly what he did. His power didn't just run on the music, it ran on distance, on things left unsaid, on that unsettling, dark halo surrounding his name. That's why the dark legend wasn't just some random dirt sticking to a great guitarist from the outside. It amplified the brand. It made his image heavier, more dangerous. And after all that, the excuse that the public just dreamed this up on their own doesn't hold water. This wasn't just a rumor. This was a persona that profited off its own fog for way too damn long. The myth around Jimmy Page survived for decades for one simple reason. It paid off for everyone. Fans didn't just get a rock star. They got a figure larger than life. Page already had Led Zeppelin. He had his status as the architect of their sound, a reputation as a man with a singular vision. That dark halo around his name only multiplied that weight. It didn't build intimacy, it built distance. It didn't offer clarity, it offered exclusivity. The media cashed in too. A story about a great musician sells well. A story about a great musician tied to Aleister Crowley, "Do What Thou Wilt," the Loch Ness estate, and a flat-out refusal to talk about beliefs or magic, that prints money. It had everything you need to milk a story dry. A cult hero, forbidden symbolism, disturbing associations, and an open-ended question. You don't have to prove a legend like that dead to rights. You just have to keep recycling it. That's why the conversation around Page always drifted, away from just the music, straight into the shadows surrounding it. The industry wasn't losing any sleep over it either. For Led Zeppelin, it was just another layer of greatness. For Page himself, just another way to keep his distance. To remain a figure nobody could fully decode. That's exactly why the myth never died. It operated like a well-oiled machine. The fans got a rock god. The press got a highly profitable dark legend. And Page? He got a persona that grew heavier and more untouchable by the minute. The mystery surrounding his name didn't hurt the brand. It bulletproofed it. The bottom line here is dead simple. You don't have to brand Jimmy Page a Satanist to see the big picture. You just have to admit the uncomfortable truth. For way too long, his name was tied to a deliberate trail of symbols, hints, and dead silence. A trail that fed the dark myth and did the heavy lifting for his brand. The public got a guitar great, the architect of Led Zeppelin, a man throwing around massive cultural weight and riding shotgun with that name for years, Aleister Crowley. Do What Thou Wilt, the Loch Ness Manor, the talk of magic, and a stubborn refusal to give one straight, grounding answer. That's not just random static around a rock star. That is built by design. The easy out is to say the public blew it all out of proportion themselves. But the public doesn't spin this kind of material out of thin air. They just step on the gas when the framework is already there. Page's true genius wasn't just in his music or his producer's vision. He knew exactly how to weaponize mystery and turn it into a hard asset. That's why the darkness trailing his name never dragged the legend down. It was the exact thing that made it grow.